Do you get the impression that Amorim has almost been a little bit shocked by the situation?
I think he must be. If you had an honest conversation with him, he'd probably be like, yeah, okay. I knew it was going to be a tough ask. I'm surprised that it's this ropey, and then even not being able to sort of strengthen in January, it does really make things difficult.
Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. This is Inside United with Laurie Whitwell from The Athletic. Of course, Jay is here as well. Hello, Jay.
How are we doing?
Very well, thank you. Laurie, how are you? Good to get you back on the show once again. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me on. I'm good, yeah. I'm happy that the transfer window is closed, to be honest, because there's always that sort of feeling of anxiety about, is there a move happening? Do I need to be on the phone? So it's closed, no more deals right now.
Do you prefer it when United are doing loads of business, when there's loads of stuff happening? Like, we've had it over a few years, haven't we? We've had like a frenzy on deadline day, or do you prefer it when it's a little bit quieter like it was this time around?
Probably more so this way round.
Yeah.
I do enjoy when you hear about a transfer happening.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're quite good on the Marcus Rashford loan to Villa at the Athletic, but I prefer it when it's not so much kind of whack-a-mole where, okay, United are supposedly signing this player or that player, this player, and you're having to kind of research a little bit about who they even are. Does it make sense? And just so many different stories around the club. It's difficult to keep track of. So you do lose yourself a little bit in situations like that. So I was personally, selfishly, a bit more grateful for a quieter one.
It was definitely a bit more quiet this year. And we've got loads to talk about in terms of the transfers, sort of the impact that has on Amorim and his standing at Man United. Also what that tells us about INEOS as owners, and a sort of a change of tact from previous sort of regimes, if that's the right word. Let's start with the biggest transfer, I would say, is Marcus Rashford. It's a topic we've spoken about on here sort of at great length in terms of why he was out of the squad. And if anyone wants or missed any of the details on that, make sure you go and check out those podcasts. But I'm pretty sure everyone knows he's out of the squad, why he was out of the squad. That deal happening with him and Aston Villa kind of came out of nowhere a little bit. Like, for the first 3 quarters of the window, it was Dortmund, it was maybe Milan, it was maybe Barcelona at a push. Even Chelsea had been kind of rumoured at one stage. And then all of a sudden, Aston Villa are closing on a deal for Marcus Rashford. How did that happen? And why did it end up being Aston Villa of all teams?
I think there's a few factors. Financial is a big one, right? Where there was certainly a lot of interest in Marcus Rashford. Absolutely, it was all genuine. AC Milan, Borussia Dortmund, Barcelona even. Barcelona, I think, was the one that he had his heart set on. I think it would have been seen as a really positive move for him. A team that are fighting for the title in Spain, that are in the Champions League, a creative side that obviously creates a lot of chances. A place in Barcelona, which is a brilliant city to live in. Ultimately, and at the start of the month, it looked like absolutely no chance Barcelona because of their whole thing with Ethan registering Dani Olmo. But then they managed to pull one of their levers, and they've got this kind of one-in, one-out system.
It's so ridiculous, the levers thing.
Yeah.
Like, these levers don't actually exist. It's not like, go in the basement and pull that switch and see what happens. They're just selling stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They call them
future
levers.
ideas of concepts, really. It's so sort of niche what they're kind of giving away for money, and at this moment obviously it doesn't seem like they're giving away much, but actually in future, when it comes down to the brass tacks things, I think it probably will show itself. Anyway, they then were able to actually sign players, but even then they needed to kind of lose someone from the squad to then be able to afford Marcus Rashford, and it never really came to the point of looking like it was going to happen, although there was lots of talk around it. And then so at that point, then he as a player has to sort of wonder, okay, well, where can I go? Because the alternative is, do I take my chances at Manchester United, where I've not been in the scene for 2 months and the manager is saying things in press conferences that are pretty strong, and do I feel like I can win myself back a place in that team, or do I need to look elsewhere in England? And that's obviously where it came down to. Aston Villa, a little bit out of nowhere. We were sort of hearing a little bit about it. I'm trying to think what day we're recording this on. It's on Wednesday now, so a couple of days after the transfer window's closed. About around this time last week, hearing that Aston Villa were in the hunt for him, or at least having talks around him, and a bit more substance than just let's think about this player as an opportunity, because you come to think of it as John Duran going away. I think that was the key trigger,
what
right?
a deal that is, by the way.
64 million or something.
To start with, can go up to about 75 million, I think.
So they've obviously been real beneficiaries of that Saudi market in their sort of recalibration of the kind of player they're looking for, young, up and coming. I know he's kind of already a bit established at Aston Villa, but he's certainly, you feel like, got more to give. So for them to get him is obviously a big coup for them. I think Aston Villa, they were even looking to sell him last summer, really, John Duran. I think there's been issues, right, around him wanting more game time and the friction that then causes with Ollie Watkins being the main guy. Arsenal putting a bid in for Ollie Watkins. So you're thinking, all of a sudden, is Aston Villa's attack going to be totally reshaped? So within that, though, the Marcus Rashford possibility was discussed more formally. Unai Emery, from what we're told, was massively backing it and wanted to wanted Aston Villa to look at whether it was possible financially, because obviously he's now going in there. I think United have got a pretty decent salary coverage for a player. I wasn't anticipating that level.
What is it again, just in case anyone...
So they're saying 75% minimum, potentially 90%, depending on what happens. So like the Jadon Sancho one with Borussia Dortmund, where they were able to actually get to the Champions League final, United built in clauses within that deal that then were given a financial reward in response to that. So I think it's something like that. And so it could actually be a sort of, for a player that wasn't featuring at all, it's not a good deal, because you've got a guy that ultimately can score for you. I think he's still third top scorer in the Premier League for United this season. So you're losing that.
He's not played since the end of November.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Says more about United than does about Marcus Rashford right now, to be brutally honest.
I agree. And so I don't think you can ever, from a United point of view, say this is a great deal for us, because you're losing that kind of potential quality, but the reality was obviously different from their point of view, where they didn't think they were going to get that. So to actually get any money back for a player that wasn't even featuring, I think they can say, and it's definitely more than I think people had anticipated, given the scale of salary that he earns.
Yeah, that's pretty good, that.
Yeah. Do you feel like this is the end of Marcus Rashford at Manchester United? Because obviously this is a loan move, they can buy him at the end of it. There's lots of ifs and buts. I mean, he might go there and just be terrible and they might not want him, or he might go there and smash it, they might want to keep him. Do you think there's any way back for Marcus Rashford at Manchester United now? Do you feel like this is it?
I think it's a really big question, that. My gut would be that could be his last game for United now. The one away, Victoria Pilsen, where obviously he got hooked pretty soon after half-time, if not at half-time, which would be a really disappointing sort of epitaph for his career at United. Given all the good things that he's done, I think he's like a 13th highest scorer for the club, coming through the academy, so many great moments. But it feels like that situation is not a healthy one on either side, where not only Ruben Amorim, but people above him feel that there was an exit necessary. Marcus Rashford hasn't looked himself at United for a good while, right? And whether he's fully committed to doing what he needs to do for United, that's a question that obviously has been raised by Ruben Amorim leaving him out for so long, and then saying other things in press conferences and from our own sources as well, as you've said earlier there, Joe, in terms of what we've reported on The Athletic. So let's see. I mean, I guess the ideal situation for everybody is he tears it up with Aston Villa, they get through the Champions League, because that's the appeal for him. Ultimately, I think he's then thought about it and realised, well, okay, I can go to Aston Villa. They're in the Champions League. He's eligible to play, even though he's played in the Europa League. The rules are that he can play in the Champions League. What a prospect that is for him, to all of a sudden be reinvigorated on that platform. If he goes there and does brilliantly, Aston Villa can get a player for 40 million. That is a bargain, really, given what he's done already in his career at an age that you think he can go on and still perform. United will go, well, it was never going to work for us, so 40 million is a pretty decent transfer fee, and then he gets a new start at a club that is a brilliant club. It's a storied, historical club. I know from Manchester United's point of view, they will think going on from United to Aston Villa, it feels deflating, right? I think from a point of view of somebody who's kind of watched his career flourish at United. But that being said, the reality of the modern game is different now, and certainly United's current plight is different.
I think as well, if he does have to go to another English team, another Premier League team, obviously not going to go down leagues, I think Aston Villa is about as palatable as a team you could pick. Like, obviously City or Liverpool would be a killer if he goes there and tears it up. Arsenal, I think the same. Chelsea maybe a notch below them, of like, you might be helping them push for a title if they can get that 20 plus goal a season Rashford. But Villa, I can sort of live with that if in a jealousy sort of sense. There's been obviously loads of reports on Rashford, and we'll talk about Dorgu, and we'll talk about some of the more kind of outright positive stories in a minute as well. But I do want to kind of almost close the chapter on Rashford a little bit while he's out on loan. There's loads of reports about off the pitch stuff, training stuff, personal life stuff. And Amorim's kind of hinted at all that himself, hasn't he? He said, I watch you wherever you are, kind of Mr. Santa Claus, he sees you when you sleep in style. But
on his naughty list.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he clearly has been Rashford, hasn't he? But do you think there's ever a case that Marcus Rashford gets unfair scrutiny? Because it feels like over the last 3 or 4 years, whenever there's been anything about Rashford off the pitch or behind the scenes, there seems to have always been sort of this kind of suggestion of pushback from his camp or his team have denied this or pushed back on this, or that he does train properly. Do you think he seems to think a lot of this is unfair? Is that the feeling you get, or do you think that what every criticism has kind of been fair enough and right, or do you think that he is treated a little bit differently maybe? You've
definitely got to be balanced as a journalist and always scrutinise who's telling you what and why, and hopefully from my own point of view, I've only ever done stories that I feel totally confident in, and I would back to the final, part of however someone wanted to push me on it. But yeah, he is scrutinised a lot.
Yeah.
But he's scrutinised a lot because he is one of the key figures at the world's biggest club, or one of the biggest clubs. He's obviously achieved a lot. He's internationally successful as a brand as much as a football player. Everything that he did going against the government in lockdown to help feed kids that were going to go, starving without kind of intervention on that kind of trajectory, I think was incredibly brave and bold and fantastic that he did that. But it then obviously elevated into a status where a lot of people just generally in the nation that weren't necessarily interested in football then knew who he was. So that's perhaps why then just more column inches will be written about him, whatever, good or bad.
Yeah.
And then obviously, but it's not. I don't think it's not members of the media that are dropping him from a team for 2 months. So there's going to be a reason for that, and football clubs, there'll be a lot of things that are kept out of the public eye that aren't scrutinised, and so for this to be something that then is actually brought to public domain, I think there has to be a lot of substance to it, in my opinion. And United would not want to lose a player who's as good as Marcus Rashford, who's earning as much as he is, if there wasn't a serious reason for it. Now, people might say it's a financial reason. He's on too much money that they can afford now, so they're trying to get him out the door. And I mean, I suppose the kind of equivalent would be Casemiro, who equally hasn't played since the Newcastle game. Well, he came on, didn't he, in a game recently, but he's not started since the Newcastle game. I think that's more of a stylistic choice from Ruben Amorim, where he doesn't feel like he's up to it, and he's spoken on that theme as well. Amorim with Rashford is different. He's as you say, hinted at. Well, he mentioned life, he mentioned training in his post-Fulham press conference, where he then obviously went on to mention George Vital. So that's quite strong stuff, really, from a manager to say that. So I think it would be journalists not doing their job properly if we kind of look the other way on why he's not in the squad.
What did you make of that? Because that seemed pretty brutal.
Yeah.
From Ruben Amorim, obviously you're in the press conference, you see him a lot more than we do, but he's always comes across as quite a sort of jovial, charismatic kind of guy. He's
strong though.
Yeah, but that was like, that seems to go a bit further than he had been, where he'd say, we will look at all elements and if he was trying or whatever. But then to sort of make that comment, and he knows the media, he knows how that would have been taken.
Because he's saying any player, that was clarified, but it's about Rashford. The question was about Rashford.
He's not daft, is it?
Yeah.
That was like, wow, he's really had enough of him. Like, just from a fan's point of view, that's how I felt. It sort of shocked me, to be honest with you, that he went that far with him, and it just shows where the relationship had got to.
Totally right. And so now, is he saying that because that's just how he feels, and he thinks, I'm just going to put this out there? And it was kind of like, it was the last question of the press conference, and it kind of, there was a couple. It wasn't like they were pushing him. It was Mark Ogden of ESPN that was asking him. It was like sort of 3 different parts of the question. It was all, what would Rashford have to do after the transfer window closes to get back in your squad if he is still at the club? And so then he obviously says about, a goalkeeping coach at 63 and kind of has a bit of a limp, and, so you're kind of thinking, okay, that's an interesting image.
One of the pigeons in Piccadilly Gardens.
Yeah, they'd get a game before him.
Yeah.
Like,
spray a little number 10 on a pigeon's back and play that. It's like, come on, it's a bit disrespectful.
I actually noticed as well in the Crystal Palace game, obviously we get the little monitors at Old Trafford because it wasn't on TV, but they were zooming in on George Vital at different moments to kind of,
of course they were.
The cameras.
Obviously.
But was that a message to Rashford to say this really is, I'm going to go a bit public here with sort of how I'm feeling? If he's really hasn't done what he's wanted him to do in the last couple of months of training, because he's said, I just want improvement in training. Is it a message to the United board to say you do really need to move him on from this situation because I won't be picking him. I've literally said that there in that answer, really. Because it doesn't feel like a particular come on to the interested clubs, does it? Like, it's actually a very risky game from a United negotiation point of view if you're kind of putting that out there so clearly. So that's why I do think it's pretty decent that they've got a good coverage of salary. And certainly other clubs will look at United and go, United's the problem. How many times have we seen it before where players have not worked out at United, they've gone elsewhere and done okay? I would also say there's probably a few occasions where they still have not performed elsewhere. Maybe Anthony Martial or Jesse Lingard had a really good loan at West Ham, but then obviously since that point it's not quite worked out. Or he's gone to Sol, he's having a great time over there, but it's not been at the Premier League level, I suppose. But he did have a brilliant time at West Ham, and you're sort of thinking, if Marcus Rashford goes and does that at Aston Villa, will United look bad by comparison? And I think a lot of clubs looked at that situation and thought we could actually get something out of Rashford. Certainly Aston Villa have. Certainly Emery thinks that he can reignite that love for football, that skill that he's got, that innate ability to go past players and score goals. And it'd be interesting to see how he fits into that team, though, because they often do. It's kind of Ollie Watkins is the main guy, right? And it's kind of like a narrow sort of 4-4-2 almost. I mean, he could potentially play behind him, or does he play one of those wider positions, almost in midfield? It'd be really fascinating to see how he fits in.
I'm just gutted, it's ended like this.
Because
listen, it's been coming. I get it. I'm not saying we should have kept him. I think he had to move on. But there was a time when Marcus Rashford was my favourite player. It was, everything about him I loved. He was an exciting player. He scored big goals. Big
local
games. Lad come through the academy. Going up against the government, you could be proud of him. And then it's just been horrible for so long. He looks depressed. He looks like he's not enjoying his football. The crowd and the fans have had enough of him, and I understand, to a certain degree. I think sometimes it crosses a line, but I get why fans have had enough of him. And it's just the way it's ended with him going to Aston Villa. No disrespect to him, because I agree with you, they are a big club and it's a lot of history, whatever. But him going to Aston Villa in the middle of the season when he's 27 or whatever it is, how's it come to this? It's just sad, isn't it?
Yeah,
just is, you know what I mean? And the manager basically said I'd play a 63-year-old goalkeeper coach ahead of Marcus Rashford. I never saw that one coming.
No. I mean, like, if you go back to just before he got dropped, you would never have seen this coming. I know it's obviously been apparent for the last couple of months, but up until then, it wasn't.
That Everton game, I got excited and tweeted statement win. Ruben Amorim. I thought this system actually unlocks quite a few different characteristics of players, and didn't it look like
Xerxes was scoring?
As it turns out,
was like the wing back we all wanted.
And that was actually the weekend then when Amorim had this conversation with Rashford about his kind of habits away from Old Trafford. So that it's kind of like a really pivotal moment. That, I mean, maybe this, as you say, it was a long time coming. Perhaps you can go back to last year and the Belfast nights out, and maybe this was always coming in that regard. But it did feel like earlier in the season, it kind of looked like he was maybe fine again.
It looked sharper than last season, certainly. Right, I think we can kind of draw a line on the Rashford stuff a little bit, until next week at least. But yeah, obviously we're not going to never mention Marcus Rashford again, but I think
allow him to go and play for Villa and see how it goes.
We can kind of gently move on from that being the main story, I think, which I think is probably good for everyone, including Rashford, who probably hasn't enjoyed much about playing for Man United over the last 18 months, so maybe he can enjoy being elsewhere. We're going to talk about some specifics, Dorgu and Heaven, and some other things that have happened in particular. But before we do that, can we talk a bit more generally about the window? And it felt as though it was an exercise in financial chess rather than on the pitch sort of move.
Nice phrasing there, I like that.
Thank you very much. We've got obviously big earner Marcus Rashford mostly off the wage bill, almost entirely off the wage bill if he does well there. We've got Anthony, again another pretty big earner, not to the level of Rashford. He's sort of out the way as well. Malacia has left. Ethan Wheatley as well, obviously much less significant in terms of finances. But the ins weren't particularly spectacular. Dorgu is a very promising signing, but it's a sort of relatively cheap left wing back, no striker brought in. We're not scoring goals. We're on for what I think our worst ever goal scoring season in the Premier League, and we haven't brought any goals in. What have you learned about INEOS, maybe even about Ruben Amorim, over the sort of the month of January that we didn't already know, do you think?
Certainly that they really will stick to their guns on how much money they've got to spend. I wondered whether the Crystal Palace performance and the fact that Kobbie Mainoo started up front And that's an interesting one to maybe get into with Ruben Amorim again, to sort of ask if that was kind of like a message to the people above to go and get somebody, or was it genuinely your theory that he would be a better bet to start that game up top than Højlund or Xerxes? So I thought maybe they would panic. You've seen this before, haven't we, in January windows where United have kind of gone and pushed the boat out for a player that maybe wasn't quite right, but just need a body in. Matthijs Tel was available, but what we're told is that Bayern Munich were asking for £5 million loan fee with no option to buy. So United were thinking, well, if he comes in, then he does well, then we've kind of just plumped to a player for Bayern Munich's benefit and not for ours. So obviously he's gone to Tottenham, and I think there is a buy option to buy there. Yeah.
But I think there's some suggestion that kind of Tel might be able to say I'm all right.
Well, with anything, I mean, Rashford might be able to say that with Villa, for example. Yeah, they've got to then work out the wages and whether you commit to it or not. Let's see on that one. But United didn't go for it. They felt that it wasn't the right financial move to do, wasn't the right sporting move to do. Because Tel he's not been tearing it up in Bayern Munich. He's not in the team and he's scoring goals. So that was their point of view. Same with like Christopher Nkunku or Liam Bailey, other players that they kind of sort of wondered about. So now I guess it's back on Ruben Amorim to sort of see if he can get the right configuration of players, get these players firing, getting them into goal scoring opportunities. But it does leave the squad pretty light, right, in terms of goal threat when you've got Højlund, Xerxes, Ahmad, Garnacho. They're your four sort of senior forwards, and the oldest one is 23. It's quite remarkable. But what they will say, United, is that they are in really straitened times financially, based on the Glazer ownership. It's coming home to roost. That 2005 takeover, the debt leverage onto the club, and the mismanagement of recruitment for several years has now put United in a very tricky position cash-wise, not just on the kind of financial regulations and PSR and FFP, but also just having the actual funds to put down. If they go and spend in the summer, for example, last couple of summers, they've spent using their revolving credit facility, the credit card. So that's a position that I think Jim Ratcliffe doesn't want to be in. He wants to be the club to be raising its own money and then spending its own money in a more sort of restrained fashion. Obviously, sport comes into that. They can't just sort of say we're not going to sign players and then hope that everything works out. They will need injection, but at least this gives them more scope to buy the kind of players that they want in the summer. Let's see again in due course. I think January was all about that, sort of shedding the squad of players that they felt weren't right and bringing in a left wing back. That was the big. I know striker was up there, but I think left wing back was the real big one to fix, because you've got this system only ever works, it seems to me, if you've got attack-minding wing backs that can defend but can really go forwards. And I think Dorgu seems to fit that bill. It's a big question mark. He's 20. He's coming from Serie A. So far, United signing players from Serie A has kind of had a mixed, should we say, being generous.
Has it even been mixed?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
Højlund to start with in Europe and stuff.
Onana's been up and down, but even just over the last sort of 20 years, it's not been.
Veron was all right for a bit.
Veron had about 20 decent games in 2 seasons or whatever it was.
Great player.
I loved Veron.
He's a great player.
Seriously, in Europe especially.
He wasn't great for Man United.
Wasn't quite the Veron we saw at Lazio.
No, exactly. Go on.
No, just on this. The big worry I've got, I mean, obviously I want to see Manchester United winning football matches, and it is a bit grim at the minute, but do you think INEOS will give Ruben Amorim a bit of patience with this? Because they understand, look, you have sold him a bit of a duffer this January. If the results don't improve, then you can't judge him too harshly, because he's crying out for players, and not only have you not given him players, you've actually taken some away from him. So on the whole, do you think they'll be patient with him? Because that's my only worry. I don't think he's going to get sacked before the summer or whatever, but that they start questioning him or losing faith in him, because they have been a bit sort of trigger happy at other clubs they've owned, and also with Dan Ashworth as well. Do you think he'll get the time he needs? Yeah,
there's so much to unpack in that little bit, actually, because I think on the financials really quickly, Dan Ashworth, obviously them hiring and then sacking him, that is costing money that then potentially could have been used this January window. Okay, so I'm not saying the big picture is, I think, the previous regime and the Glazers, but there was certainly some things that they've done in terms of giving Erik ten Hag an extra bit of contract that then cost more money, hiring Ruben Amorim that cost money. That then obviously features into this January window. In terms of their relationship with Amorim, I think it's solid. I think that they understand that he's working in very difficult circumstances, brought in mid-season to change system, and I think absolutely, his persona as Manchester United manager is what they're after. You know, someone that can really take on these big issues and communicate well. Clearly, there's going to be a point where they're like, still, even with this bad hand that you've been dealt, we would perhaps expect, you know, a bit more return, a bit better results. But let's see how it goes rest of the season. There has been moments where you've seen what he can do come to fruition, you know, away at the Etihad, away at Anfield, in big games. Maybe that's what this team can get themselves up for, you know, if it's Europa League that they now have to focus on. If they actually end up winning the Europa League, is that still a kind of positive season? It feels like it would have to ultimately
after
go
the way
down
things are going, that'd be a miraculous season.
Yeah, Champions League qualification.
Then win the Champions League with a trophy. I'd be buzzing.
So maybe that's that. I think they understand. He understands the financial picture. When he started talking about the January window, even before we got into this, he basically was saying we can't sign players. We have to get players out to sign players, and ultimately they've got, you know, 3 first team loans out. 1 first team player in. I know they're sort of talking about Ayden Heaven as a first team signing, but he's an academy player from Arsenal. Yeah. So I'm kind of saying that Dorgu's the first team signing. So I think that's perhaps even beyond what he was anticipating in January. Although that being said, he obviously said after Palace, you know, we're trying everything, and he started Kobe Mainoo up front, and you know, so you're sort of wondering, okay, what are his true feelings on how that month has gone?
Well, I mean, just generally speaking, do you get the impression that Amorim has almost been a little bit shocked by the situation, or do you think it was very clearly explained to him before he came in? Because not just in terms of the financial situation, obviously that's been a little bit more public over the last few years. If you want to look for it, you can find those numbers and you can find the debt and but maybe the manager of Sporting Lisbon hasn't been focusing on it the way we will have.
Yeah.
But also from a sort of squad shape perspective, like you get in and your biggest player, Marcus Rashford, is maybe taking his eye off the ball slightly in terms of his sort of football career right now at Manchester United. There seems to be a suggestion of that. Bruno Fernandes is doing Bruno things, so that's pretty good. But then, like, I don't know, that you look through the squad, none of the strikers are scoring. The defence, arguably our best defender, Luke Shaw, hasn't played in 9 months and maybe is set for a little bit more of a timeout as well, with some level of injury or setback in the last day or so. Like, you go through the team, Harry Maguire all of a sudden, who couldn't get a game 18 months ago, is one of our best centre-backs again, because it feels like things are just sort of stretched and wayward all over the pitch. Do you think he's been shocked at the state of Manchester United as a football club, Ruben Amorim?
He's been asked this a few times. I'm trying to think back as to exactly what his answers have been. I think he's always been quite diplomatic and has kind of not tried to go down that route at all, and said he came into this with his eyes open. And certainly that, you know, they had talks before he got the job, you know, to that end, you know, to kind of explain that, and he will have known coming in with his idea that it's going to take time. He's had issues when he first started, I suppose, at Casapia, where he basically said, I'll quit if it doesn't work out, and then it kind of clicked, and it kind of... I spoke to one of the players in the team from when that happened. Oh, good stuff.
We interviewed him, and he said, yeah, he did say that, and he was literally like, we were like, what's going on? Like, the manager's going to quit if we don't win. We'd better win, and they did.
But see, this is it. So I think that's what you have to see every act that he's done through that prism of, he is an emotional guy, clearly. Yeah. Some of it is to push buttons, and then I guess maybe some of it is just how he really feels, and if that triggers a reaction, then, you know, so be it. But I think he must deep down be surprised at the unevenness of the squad, the different players, what they're able to give him. I think he would have probably been banking on, say, having a Marcus Rashford, getting him sort of firing a bit more. Rasmus Højlund, for example, being more of the kind of Victor Gyökeres striker that he had at Sporting Lisbon, and being able to, Sporting, I should say. I'll get told off for saying Sporting Lisbon, sorry.
Well, what's wrong about that?
Portuguese fans of Sporting don't like, it's not Sporting Lisbon. They're called Sporting CP. And they're from Lisbon, obviously, but I've been told in no uncertain terms that it is not Sporting.
So it's like saying Lisbon. Arsenal London?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd never say that.
Yeah.
Although I might do from now on if it winds Arsenal fans.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think he must be, if you had an honest conversation with him, he'd probably be like, yeah, okay. I knew it was going to be a tough ask. I'm surprised that it's this, you know, ropey, and then even not being able to sort of strengthen in January. You know, it does really sort of, I don't know, make things difficult. You know, that being said, you know, that's why you manage Manchester United, right? You're sort of tasked with these difficult propositions.
Yeah. Obviously, Ayden Heaven's coming as well. We was chatting to Finn from Academy Scoop, or Academy Scoop, I should say, and he was saying about how he could be a backup to Lisandro Martinez. We've seen what's happened to Lisandro Martinez. What do you think will happen with Ayden Heaven this season? Do you think he's going to get many minutes? Is he viewed as just one for the future, or is he viewed as someone that can come in now and do a bit of a job? Because obviously we are a bit lacking in defence. Yeah,
credit to Finn on that one, because I was surprised when I saw him say that. I was like, is he sure? Like, he's only played, I think, one game for Arsenal as a sub in a Carabao Cup tie, 18. But yeah, when United then signed him, it's a club signing, right? So the idea was for him to, I think, be signed in the summer, but then the opportunity presented itself to get him a bit earlier, and they've gone ahead and done it. And obviously now, if Martinez, as it looks like, is going to be out for a considerable length of time, certainly for the rest of, certainly for a fair bit of this season, it feels like,
or more.
Oh yeah. Then I don't want to kind of go too far because it's not been confirmed yet. But I think that obviously presents an opportunity there for him to get some minutes. But as I say, 18, you'd ideally like these players to be able to come into a situation that's settled and not straight in and okay, go on, do something for us and have so much pressure. But
how many players are you describing with that sentence, by the way? That just get chucked. Fix it. Garnacho, fix it. Yeah. Elanga, fix it. Hoyland, fix it. Yeah. Yoro, fix it. Yeah. Heaven, fix. What? Brandon Williams, go on, save it. We're just chucking kids in and making them fix a job that 27, 28-year-olds on hundreds of thousands of pounds a week cannot fix. Yeah. And then we expect children and inexperienced players to fix it. And when they don't, we call them crap. We tell them we should have never bought them in the first place. You're a waste of money. You're a waste of time. You think, give them half a chance. Yeah. At least with Heaven, no one's going to throw the price tag in his face. At least it didn't cost 50 million.
This is it. They've obviously tried to adjust things, haven't they? So even Dorgu's salary in the piece on The Athletic that we wrote, about £40,000 a week was sold, something like that. So that resets.
That's less than you're on, I believe.
It is, it's close, but
not a lot anyway, is it?
I know, yeah. What's the difference between writing some stuff every now and again for The Athletic, coming on air and performing in front of 70,000 people at Old Trafford? Yeah, seems fairly
pretty comparable.
Yeah. I think they've tried to reset things, haven't they, with that? And okay, a 20-year-old shouldn't be on ridiculous money anyway, but if that's part of their strategy to kind of get players in, on more modest wages, that therefore there's not that expectation on them as much. But then are you lowering then the expectation at United? Is that what people will criticise them for, right? They will say you're actually making it okay to be 13th in the table. But their hope is that these players will then grow and be real, genuine quality, and they've actually got them. They've been brave to kind of go earlier than they would have done normally.
The wages thing seems like a good move.
Yeah.
Because we're suffering from overinflated wages, aren't we now, where we've had to struggle to move Marcus Rashford on, and thankfully, obviously, like you mentioned earlier, Emery is a fan and wanted him. Anthony was another one. I know he's not on, like you said, Joe, he's not on the same money as Marcus, or Casemiro's getting paid 300 odd grand a week, whatever it is, just to shout a few things from the sidelines. He's not even getting minutes. I know he got a few minutes. Was it against Palace he came on?
Yeah.
But he's not playing really, is it? And it feels like we've always been, and going back even further, even with young players, we tend to almost panic and go, right, give them loads of money to keep them. So I think this makes a lot of sense to me. And 40 grand a week, it's not pennies, but it's not like, why the hell are we paying that?
In Premier League terms, it's very affordable.
That's what I mean, especially
you have to put that all through the filter of all of these wages are ludicrous, but by comparison, there's actually scope for that to improve and be rewarded over a decade and still not be on 700 grand a week. Likes of Jadon Sancho when he came in on, there's massive discrepancies in what the reporting is on his wages, but let's say minimum 200 grand plus. You give him a contract, we signed him at 22, 21. Let's say you upgrade that when he's 24, then he's on 400. Then in 6 years' time, he's on 500-600 grand. You think that was never going to scale properly. So that does make some sense. You mentioned before about Amorim and his emotional side and the fact that, he threatened to quit if he didn't win his next game, and obviously it worked. And how much of that is tactical and considered and kind of thought through, and how much of it is just the sort of almost like coincidental genius of these types of people? Like, how much do they know what they're doing works, and how much of it is just instinct? Like, Sir Alex Ferguson or Jose Mourinho or Pep Guardiola, these kind of Premier League geniuses, I would say. is every action they take considered and understood? Is, do we have to kick Rashford out because it tells the rest of the squad what's happening? Or is it a kind of a coincidence of the decision making that just happens to work well for successful people, if you know what I mean? And I wonder, whether at times people like Jose Mourinho, who kind of just does what Jose does, when he came to United and doing Jose didn't really work, is that a sort of a problem that we've had in the past, where you're almost trusting people who do things on instinct so much that when you're thrown into this unique environment at Manchester United, those instincts aren't working anymore? And I wonder if that's been the case with players as well. Like, you bring in the likes of Sancho, who to me feels like a very instinctive kind of player. You bring in certain people like Lukaku and Pogba and these kind of genius types almost. Maybe we need someone who's a bit more kind of earlier in their career, thinking things through, trying to prove themselves more, rather than just keep doing what you were always doing and it'll work, because it doesn't work at United. And I wonder if maybe one worry I have with Amorim is he's already apologised for one thing he said in the press conference and kind of said, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Which thing was it?
It was about the United worst team ever, wasn't
the worst team ever thing.
Yeah.
He said it was a mistake, didn't he?
Yeah, he said it was a mistake to have phrased it that way, and he also clarified the thing about the coach as well. He said that's about anyone, not just Rashford. So there's hints that his emotional side is causing him some sort of doubt, some friction. I just hope that what has worked for him in the past is going to be scrutinised and sort of pressured so much at United that it might not work anymore. That's a bit of a worry I have.
No, it's a very interesting point to raise as well. I think that he... so that's one of my phones just popped out.
Wow.
I think that he's young enough, right, so that he's at the start, not the start, but like he's achieved at Sporting already, but he's early enough in his trajectory that you hope that there can be a synergy made between him and United, where there's maybe going to be some bumps along the road, but they'll figure it out together, and then he'll realise, okay, this is what I need to do in these particular moments. I think some of his apologies have maybe been a little bit, I don't know, I think he's probably just felt like he had to say them, whether he necessarily believes them or not, and it maybe just showing that humility. I think that's a big quality, certainly for us. I don't know what he's like exactly with the players, but he's quite disarming with journalists and then people in the media, and I think that makes him more of a warm character that you kind of want to succeed, and hopefully he's like that with the players, where he can absolutely deliver some zingers that really make you go ouch, but at the same time he's able to kind of say, well, I make mistakes myself, so actually let's try and get through this together. I think certainly what he's achieved at Sporting was above expectations. He was able to get past the two big clubs in Portugal to win Sporting, first title for a good while, and then was looking like he was going to do back-to-back for the first time since the 70s, I think, for Sporting. So that is kind of pretty strong evidence that this guy is good at making a football team win football matches. Also in Europe as well, in the Champions League they were doing well. I know they only just squeaked through in this sort of qualification phase now since he departed, but they were up there at the top when he left. So I do feel like he's got something, but obviously he's young, he's only just turned 40. He won't have all the answers, because you can't. Like, football will present unique and new and fresh challenges every single day, let alone one the scale of United, where you've got all the eyes of the world on you. You've got players in the squad that are their own brands and their own kind of companies themselves, so they've got pressures that they're pushing back on you and people around it. And Fergie definitely made mistakes when he was United manager, but I think what he ultimately was able to make happen after that first league title win was that people knew that if they did actually go with him, that they could win things, So I think we're still in that teetering point with Amorim where, he's had this success in Portugal, but people over here will be like, well, was that just Portugal? He needs something to happen with United where people go, okay, this guy, I think we can get on board with him. Because he's a very charming individual, but he is, to your point earlier, Jay, he's very hard, he's ruthless, I think. And I think he came in thinking that he needed to... I'm not saying he's done this as a kind of sacrificial lamb with Rashford and Garnacho in that Manchester derby, but I feel like if he saw a situation that wasn't right to his liking, I think he felt he had to take action immediately.
Get a tackle in nice and early, like the Roy Keane.
I remember Thomas Tuchel did the same thing, didn't he, at Chelsea when he first came, and everyone was like, oh wow, that's a bit of a strong move. Was it Hudson-Odoi?
Brought him on and took him off after 20 minutes and then just basically said, I'm paraphrasing, but I took him off because we weren't doing out.
Yeah, and that kind of thing. I mean, he was the alternative to Ten Hag in the summer, wasn't he? Tuchel. I think fans would look at him and go, he's a winner because he's won the Champions League with Chelsea. So you're right. It's that kind of put a tackle in. Kind of make your status clear from the get-go so that players know where they stand. But I think he looks to me quite a fair guy. Where he is obviously he's not got everything right, and the form and the results have been pretty bad, for the main part, with some kind of cherished moments in between that. And okay, the Europa League is still kind of there as this, great hope. I'm coming back to it. Maybe I'm.
You're right. No, you're right. We're all holding on to that. You're not alone.
But I feel like, I do think he needs some positivity towards the end of the season so that the players go, okay, yeah, we're with you. Yeah.
We've wanted this, though. We wanted a bit of balance, haven't we? Because it felt like so many managers post-Fergie have been one way or the other. Like Moyes was a bit more disciplinarian, a bit more cold, perhaps not the greatest relationship with the press, I think it's safe to say. Jose at first had that little bit of charisma, but by the end he hated everyone and was just sort of militant. Ten Hag, he was sort of, there was a feeling that he was maybe a bit too much of a disciplinarian. Ole, maybe too soft, too nice. With Amorim, already you're seeing a balance there. You're seeing that he can be this guy who's nice and friendly and can put an arm around players, whatever, but also he can be pretty scathing. And I just feel like that's what we've needed, a bit of balance. You don't need one who's sort of completely one way or the other.
It seems pretty human, doesn't it?
Yeah, someone who can do have a bit of both. And it always annoys me when people say, he said he's made mistakes and, maybe I shouldn't have said that or whatever, and I'll make mistakes. People go, you can't learn on the job at United. Well, no job is like United. So you're going to do that. You're going to have to learn a little bit, because coming from Sporting, I know this is Sporting Lisbon then, but Sporting is never going to be the same or even properly prepare for once you get to Manchester United what that's like. 'Cause it's such a massive job and so different. Yeah. So I don't mind what I'm seeing with Amorim in those sort of respects, because I think that's kind of what we needed.
Yeah.
A bit more honesty and someone who's got that balance as well.
You can't have someone who's denying and sort of burying their head in the sand on the issues, but also then wants to be best mates with everyone. Like, we can't. You need someone that's going to address things honestly. I think honesty is a big thing, in fairness.
He says that a lot. Honesty. Players know where they stand with me.
Yeah,
I am quite brutal. He admits that. A lot of what he talks about, he's quite open. There's obviously certain avenues that you try and go down. He sort of shuts that off. But I think you can ask him about a lot of subjects about United. And okay, some players might look at that and go, "Oh, he's being too open there." But I think that in time that will be shown as alleviating the pressure of the situation, really. Yeah,
sort of addressing it before someone else does. That sort of self-deprecating kind of, I've said it so you don't have to kind of
I think
angle.
so.
Yeah. Again, let's move to some specifics then. Patrick Dorgu, the main signing of the window, obviously £23 million-ish, rising up to a bit more than that, depending on what happens. Here's actually a question for you that I've wanted to ask you for a while. Do you know the add-ons, when it's like 18 million plus 5 in add-ons, do we ever know what they are and whether they've been achieved? Because like some people report pre-add-on prices, some report post-add-on prices, but we know in the past that add-ons have included Ballon d'Or clauses for some players.
Anthony Martial.
Yeah.
I think Bruno might have had a Ballon d'Or clause.
Which obviously we haven't paid on either of them. Do you ever know what they are, and do you ever sort of follow up and say those add-ons have been achieved or the X amount of them has been achieved?
I actually, in the Anthony piece that I wrote for The Athletic, it mentioned, I called it a €100 million deal because that's what it was at the time.
Yeah.
And Ajax wanted €100 million as the big transfer fee. Now, only 95 million of that was guaranteed. 5 million.
Thank God.
They did a good
because
deal
otherwise
there.
that would have been a bit of a waste of money.
5 million was in add-ons. I mean, I need to go and sort of more thoroughly scrutinise this, but I don't think those 5 million add-ons have been achieved because it was to do with the performances and I mean maybe it was a Ballon d'Or clause. I don't know, but with Dorgu, the 5 million. So I would always report the kind of deal worth, just because I think that's a fair way of capping it.
Yeah.
So for all deals across all different clubs, this is what they've ultimately potentially committed to.
Yes.
Now, obviously, within the pieces, if we're able to explain that, then great. And Dorgu, €30 million up front, or at least guaranteed, and then 5 million add-ons. I'm told that sort of the majority of those add-ons are kind of more difficult to achieve. So it would be on. Sort of club achievements, I don't know, getting to the last stage of the Champions League or whatever, the sort of a smaller portion of those add-ons are kind of fairly straightforward. So it's just if he makes a certain amount of appearances, then more money will be going to Lecce.
Yeah, it's sort of like a tip at a restaurant, isn't it? Like if you have
this is good. Where's this going? Go on.
So if I go to a restaurant and I just get completely average service, absolutely fine, I'll give it like your standard 10% tip, because I feel like that's almost assumed. That's your easily achievable add-ons. Yeah. Turn up, don't spill the French onion soup down my lap, and be relatively friendly. Yeah. If the service is noticeably excellent, really smiley, friendly, or just attentive, we've got your drink, really quick service, I might go up to a 15-20% tip. That's just slightly more difficult to achieve add-ons.
Great, I love it. It works.
So I feel like that's kind of what it is with the players.
So Patrick Dorgu, if he is able to just appear for United on a regular basis,
hot,
okay,
you're getting the 10% just for doing the standard. Yeah. And then those extra to a couple of million, that's if, you've topped my drink up for free. I didn't really know that was going to happen. Do you know what I mean?
A flourish seasoning without you even having to ask.
That's what I'm trying to say.
A bit of Parmesan on top, salt and pepper.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit of that going on. We might give them those extra add-ons. Okay, that makes more sense. Because I always think it's very rare to see an article saying another £500,000 of Dorgu's add-ons have been activated. Do you even find out about that?
The interesting ones were... Marshall was an interesting one, because I think that then ultimately was... The final bit was Ballon d'Or, wasn't it?
Everyone went mad about that.
Yeah,
that was just
but they were quite significant add-ons, weren't they? It was like 10 million or something.
Can I just say, I think this is where you might be going.
Yes.
It wasn't that ludicrous.
No.
At the time. He was like, wasn't he the Golden Boy or something? Like, he was... I know you're looking and laughing.
No, don't. It's the opposite.
No.
Putting the Ballon d'Or clause in makes us look good.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
It makes us look like
good.
Oh, sorry, yeah. That's what I mean. Like, everyone goes, imagine thinking Anthony Martial's going to win Ballon d'Or, but I think, like, we didn't obviously pay it. He didn't get near there, but he was one of the best young players on the planet at the time. And if when he was 18, you had to predict who's going to win the Ballon d'Or in the next 5 years. Probably someone would have gone, he might do.
And also, what do people want? Us to pay more for people. I want us to put a Ballon d'Or clause in a fucking Dubravka's loan deal, because that way it's Newcastle that did it. It's not us. Monaco are the ones who said you don't have to pay us this amount unless he wins a Ballon d'Or. We went brilliant. But why are we the ones getting ridiculed for that? We don't have to pay it.
Right,
we are agreeing.
I think the Wan-Bissaka one was worse.
Put a Ballon d'Or clause in
it was
there.
like they were trying to put stipulations about if we win United was saying if we win the Champions League, like, you're not even in the Champions League, like let's not go down that route. When Palace were pushing back, when Palace were like, no, you'll give us 50 million and stop this nonsense. But with Anthony Martial, I mean, and also everyone mocks that, but I actually thought at the time was like, Ballon d'Or, all right, we're not going to probably end up paying that. He's probably not going to win the Ballon d'Or. But I understand the thinking. Yeah. Because he was one of the best teenagers on the planet. And it's so difficult when you've got a teenage player to judge how they're going to go. Not everyone's going to be like, even like Ronnie when he was 19, people might not have thought he'd go and win a Ballon d'Or. He win a load, didn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's so hard to sort of to guess.
I suppose the question is, would they have got the deal without having to actually even put that clause in?
Right. Okay. Well, I don't.
So so if Monaco was saying we're only going to sell you if you kind of give us another add-on of something, and United were like, okay, well, how about if he wins the Ballon d'Or? They're like, okay, yeah, fair enough. That's plausible. Or was it like, they would actually just accepted the lower fee anyway?
Because you remember, was it the headline was 50 million money that all the obviously United fans waste of money. That was it.
What a waste of money.
What a waste. I mean, we had Dave on it. This guy Dave on it, and he was asking, and he said he didn't write that.
Don't write the headlines. That's the journalist. We always say that,
because that was what everyone picked up on, wasn't it? And for a long time, it looked like a ridiculous headline, and towards the end, everyone was kind of like, "Well,
they called it." I mean, I suppose it wasn't down the drain, was it? He scored a decent amount of goals for United, but it certainly wasn't the signing that it then looked at the time.
No, it wasn't. Just on Dorgu quickly, do you have any concerns? Because I think you mentioned it earlier, we've all spoken about it, like the amount of pressure already on this guy. It's like he's the answer to all our problems. Or once we get Dorgu in, we'll be all right. This system will start. He's going to
be Marcelo, Roberto Carlos and Gareth Bale all mixed into one.
It's like all of a sudden this player who...
Sorted.
We've just said he's on 40k a week, who's basically a kid. He's coming into the Premier League for the first time ever and has to save Manchester United's season. I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there is an element of that, like, oh God, we need to get Dorgu in this side. Do you have any concerns around that?
There's obviously going to be concerns, right? How he deals with that. But I saw his interview with MUTV or the Man United channel, and he speaks English perfectly, so that there's no adjustment. It feels like there in terms of just getting to grips with the culture of United and the club and the country. And so I think hopefully he seems like a pretty level-headed kid that would understand that, okay, you don't have to go and dribble past 5 players and put one in the top corner to win affections at United. I think people would just be happy with commitment and some diligence, right?
A bit of competence would be nice, to be honest with you, Laurie. That's where we're at the minute.
So I think if we start
just
from that
a nice 7 out of 10.
Yeah, there we go. I think it was interesting, United in the press release sort of saying, was it 4th most take-ons by a defender or by any player in Serie A? And that was to me a little bit of like, honestly, he is an attacking player. Like a little note to sort of just say, just in case you're kind of worried about us not signing a centre forward. Yeah. So I mean, let's see how he does over here. But I suppose everyone's expectations. I think they've now a bit more savvy about new signings.
I hope so, but
they
then
know that it's not going to be explosions from the get-go.
It felt like Xerxes to I would say a not insignificant minority of fans was kind of ruled out after about 6 games. Yeah. There was I saw plenty of people. I know.
So you say it goes the other way as well. Like it's not just getting excited about a new signing, but it's also if they don't deliver straight away, then it's always rubbish.
And obviously we are yet to know with Xerxes, and maybe it won't work out, and he's not been great. So people could have been right, but I do think that if Dorgu gets, let's say, skinned a couple of times in his first game, or is out of position, or has a shot that goes out for a corner or whatever, there'll already be signs of like, oh, INEOS, because there's so much negative press around INEOS and the cuts and the fact that they haven't wiped the debt and all these sort of ethereal never promises that Qatar may or may not have made through the press, that INEOS haven't lived up to this fictional version of what United could have been. That anything you do is going to be, it was wrong anyway, and now we're going to prove it. So I just hope that Dorgu gets the time he needs. And also the fact that he's coming into the worst United side in 50 years, that probably helps him as well, because the standard and the expectation is a lot lower. And if you, just like you said, Jay, go past a man occasionally, do an overlap and whip the ball across, maybe have a shot on target. Our fullbacks don't really do that. Have a shot on target every other game. Yeah, exactly. Then we'll warm to you quite quickly, and he does seem like the sort of player that United need. Like you said, he's young, he seems level-headed, he speaks well, he talks about himself confidently but without seeming too egotistical. He seems like a likeable guy from the very little we've seen of him, so hopefully that can be big for United. But it does indicate again the angle of attack from INEOS, doesn't it? Cheaper, younger, more sort of hungry players, I guess. I think it was Ralph Rangnick who said he likes players on his first or second contract because they're desperate to prove themselves.
And they're easier to sort of, manipulate into systems that...
Louis Walsh style.
Well, I've not seen it, but apparently the Boysen documentary is quite enlightening.
Do you know what I have watched it.
Is Louis Walsh...
And Louis Walsh does not come across well in it. No, this is taking a left turn. I didn't expect either of you to bring that up, but I'm glad you did, because now I feel like vindicated in watching it. Yeah. And I was shouting at Mitelli at him. He doesn't.
Can I just say that as a journalist, I've never written a story that someone has just told me, go and write that there's been a plane crash in Australia, and not then checked it out with the relevant authorities.
There's this story that he leads.
Well, that's why you brought it up.
Yeah, no, I just meant because he said he likes people from sort of basically young kids from impoverished backgrounds, because he can make them do what they want.
No, he does kind of say that, but also the documentaries you're saying there, like he talks about leaking stories to the papers to get Boyzone in the media and the press, and he says like there was one where they said they'd had a plane crash in Australia, which is a bit nuts that like.
And he forgot to tell the family, so they read it.
Reading the paper, going,
Well, the Boyzone had been in a plane crash,
just to keep them in the news for publicity, and
didn't exist.
No, there was no crash. Like,
of all the methods of transport as well, because a plane crash is usually fireball.
One way or the other, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not ideal. It's not one that's like, they've had a little bump on a T-junction. It's like...
that was... I thought that was what you were getting at.
I meant in terms of sculpting youngsters.
Yes. I think so.
That's a horrible phrase I've tried to never say again, by the way.
What a tangent this has been. Yeah.
But you know what I'm trying to say. Apologies. Sorry. Adults. Young adults.
Okay. Great.
Wasn't that the name of the sitcom you were in?
Sorry. I think Louis van Gaal, that was his preference as well, wasn't it? Kind of...
Yeah.
At Ajax, when he first came through, it was academy kids, and he could get run harder. Run harder. That's obviously one of Mad Dogs. Is one of Amorim's sort of things, and obviously Dorgu's athleticism speaks to that. So, but I think generally having younger players able to get to grips with them from a coaching point of view, they feel a bit more at ease with it. But obviously they have to then be good enough So it's sort of one thing to say, let's get a load of kids in and get them playing. If they're never actually going to be achieving the levels that you need to be for what United ultimately hope to achieve, it's mad, isn't it, to think of United being this kind of mid-table club this season, you know, and really they should be a Champions League club, but it's been a good while. I know they were in the Champions League last season, but it's been a good while since that's been a kind of reality where they are a perennial Champions League club.
Tough stuff, innit?
Just before we wrap up, you mentioned it earlier, and we don't know yet. I don't think we've spoken about it probably with Martinez. We're still waiting to find out, because there's a little bit of speculation, but as of yet, we still don't know the nature of that injury.
No, and I think, I wouldn't want to go beyond what sort of Amorim said, but the fact that he said it looks serious straight away, you know, usually managers are kind of like, well, and he did say we'll have to wait and see, you know, what the prognosis is fully. And obviously he's got his press conference tomorrow for the Leicester FA Cup game, but him even saying that after the game, I think sort of shows the concern around it. Martinez, I was there, and he went down, you know, badly. It looked like he jarred his left knee, and he straight away is asking for the substitution, and the stretchers are coming out, and it's one of those where you just think, I don't see how that is anything other than a very serious injury.
He's certainly not going to be back for the weekend, is he? No. It's one of them, best case scenario, it's a good number of weeks, and worst case scenario, obviously we all know.
Last season last season he went down in a similar kind of way.
Yeah, it was a sprained knee, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was 8 weeks, but then he came back and then he had to go away again. So it was almost like it ended up being really sort of 3 or 4 months, I think, and he obviously managed to come back just, you know, in time for the FA Cup final, where he was brilliant in it. But I mean, just such a shame, isn't it? Because it felt like after the injury that he suffered at the end of his first season, the foot, then sort of all the issues that he had around that, and then the knee injury last season, it felt like he was kind of coming back into his best form.
I think Liverpool game onwards, he was actually looking really good and like himself again. He wasn't getting kind of done for pace at the back, and his passing was stepping up.
His passing was really important. That left channel,
sort
of getting and if you got Højlund sort of run onto that, and it felt like, okay, maybe that could tap into that. And Amorim also saying the character that he is. He's obviously someone that is a demanding person, but I think is pretty, you know, well liked, and so that's a key aspect as well that you're missing out on them.
Yeah, real shame. Right, Laurie, thank you once again for coming in.
Cheers,
for another
guys.
episode. Thank you at home for joining us as well. Get your thoughts in the comments below. The way that transfer window unfolded, what does it say about Amorim? What does it say about the way INEOS are running Manchester United? And are you excited for Patrick Dorgu to come in and just change everything about United? 15 goals and assists between now and the end of the season, activating Højlund, activating Garnacho,
activating the Ballon d'Or clause.
Activating the Ballon d'Or clause first season. That's what we expect from Patrick Dorgu.
Don't forget as well, you can check it all out. There's a link in the description to The Athletic. You can check out Laurie's work there, keeping us updated. Hopefully we'll have some happier news to talk about next time you're on.
Just want some good results, don't we? Good results, good performances.
I'm hopeful.
Book our tickets to Bilbao.
There we go. In a couple of weeks we'll be back for another episode, of course. Thank you for joining us at home. We'll see you in a bit.